Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So some key concepts that I'll be talking about. First is what I will show is a review of the primary literature. The results in this presentation are mainly based on meta-analysis, which is the statistical analysis of multiple studies combined. In the interest of time, I will only discuss a few molecular pathways. If not stated, I'm talking about people who are healthy, similar to most of us here in this room. I will not be discussing the benefits of exercise, which is something I also do research on and teach. So another key concept is no one actually knows what the best nutrition for optimal cellular health is. That's a very important concept. What we know is the current best practices, and that keeps changing with time as we do more research. Also, in science, most students don't realize this, but we never can prove anything. What we can do is provide evidence, and we can disprove ideas. So, this term, good health, we all want it, but what is it? You can look at it from nutrition. So how do we define nutrition? This is the process of taking in food and using it for growth, metabolism, and repair. We have a lot of cells in our body, between 30 and 40 trillion cells, quite a lot. These cells are constantly being made, degraded, and remade. So our cells are much younger than our body. So these cells make up our tissues, our organs, and our systems, and these cells need to be nourished with many different things, including vitamins and minerals, antioxidants, etc. So what is cellular health? When the components of a cell are free from any type of significant damage, they are working properly, and they are allowed to function and reproduce properly, this is a healthy cell. Cellular health really refers to healthy cells, but cells are always becoming damaged. Small amounts of damage our cells can handle, but when cells are damaged significantly by free radicals, they become more susceptible to many diseases, including cardiovascular disease and different types of cancers. Antioxidants, especially ones that we can't make ourselves, we can make things like vitamin D, but we can't make vitamin C and E, and we have to get this from our nutrition. These vitamins protect us from these free radical damage. So, for good cellular health, we need good nutrition. There are many places you can look and see what nutrition good nutrition is said to be. This is one, choosemyplate.gov, originally from NIH. So what affect our nutrition needs? This is really important because a lot of people don't factor in these other things that are important for nutrition. Age affects our nutrition. Gender affects our nutrition. Genetic makeup affects our nutrition. Activity level. Diet. Health. And climate. These are the most common factors that will affect our nutrition. So now, this nutrition is important because our needs are unique. Everyone here is unique. How do we know this? Even identical twins don't have the same nutritional needs. So this tells us that we're all unique. So no one diet fits everyone. That's why there's so many thousands of diets available. So, what are the benefits of good nutrition? I think we all agree, you've heard this term before, and data shows that good nutrition has a lot of benefits. There are too many to really discuss here. But the two that I particularly like good nutrition for is to decrease the risk of illness. No one wants to be ill. No one asks for cancer. It also improves the quality of life. So when some people ask me about exercise, sometimes exercise may not extend your lifespan, but it improves your quality of life. You're able to be more mobile, you're able to do more things independently. And that, to me, is very important. So what are the benefits at the cell level? So when we study an individual cell, we can see that when the cell is healthy, they live longer. They have a decreased chance of cell death. They also have a decreased chance of having natural mutations. These natural mutations in a test tube, if we expose a cell to UV light, we can see mutations and cancer, they're becoming cancer cells. So when a cell is healthy, we don't see a lot of mutations happening regularly. It also decreases the risk of these cells forming other types of cells to become diseased. So what are the consequences of poor nutrition? And you can see my examples there. So, obesity, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, type 2 diabetes, sleeping problems, depression. Sounds like fun, right? Greater risk of heart disease, heart failure, and stroke. Many other consequences of poor nutrition. So we owe it to ourselves to have a good nutrition. So one thing that Americans eat a lot of is French fries. They all taste great, right? French fries, because they're fried at such a high temperature, actually produces a compound called acrylamide. And acrylamide is actually known to cause cancer in animals. And a large study in 2019 showed an unexpected contribution of acrylamide in mutagenesis in human cancers. So this was the first real study that showed a link between acrylamide and human cancers. So our diet is really important. So in this diagram here, this is the obesity in a lot of countries around the world. And it's no surprise that America is leading the way again. We're very good. You can see us there. We're the most obese country. Look at the top. You have Japan, you have Switzerland, you have Italy. And if we remember those countries and we look at the countries with the longest or the highest life expectancy, you can see those that are less obese tend to live longer. Japan, Switzerland, you can see Italy there. So this is not a direct correlation, but you can see we are not a very healthy country in terms of longevity or obesity. So if we look at cells that are from a patient who is obese, and we look at the cellular health of those cells, there are two things that come out that are different from what we previously thought. First of all, the number of fat cells don't increase in people. They stay approximately the same. The size of the fat cell changes. So the amount of fat droplets inside those cells increase. Secondly, the cell itself changes shape. The cell itself has different mitochondria from people who are healthy. The mitochondria shape has changed. But the more important fact is the enzymes in the mitochondria also change. Those enzymes now don't metabolize or oxidize fats as quickly, so they don't work to break down fat as quickly. Now, someone who is obese want to break down fat more quickly, but they can't because their cellular health has been compromised. So let's take a closer look at what's really happening. So from all my reading and my research, the three most important factors for cellular health I propose is oxidative stress, the mitochondria, and proteostasis. So oxidative stress. This occurs when there's an imbalance of something called reactive oxygen species and antioxidants in the cell. So what are free radicals? So free radicals are molecules which possess unpaired electrons and thus are very reactive. They will react with lipids, they'll react with proteins, and when they do that, they compromise the function of those different components of the cell. They are also short-lived. So if you have free radicals in excess now and you're able to stop that, your body gets healthier. But if you're continuously producing a lot of free radicals, it compromises your body significantly. So ROS was initially considered to be dangerous to all cells and have no good properties. But we now know that ROS actually, at very small amounts, is actually important for many signaling cascades in our body. For example, it's known to activate MAP kinases, phosphatases, and different gene-dependent pathways. So inhibiting all ROS is actually bad for us. And in a test tube, I can do this. I can take cells and add large amounts of vitamin C, and I can see those cells dying. But when I add very little amount of vitamin C, I can see benefits to the cell. So amount is very important. We need some reactive oxygen species in our body. The amount we need is not a lot, but we need some to activate signaling pathways. So cells need some ROS, and the maintenance of optimal ROS levels is critical for normal function of the cell and for healthy cells. So ROS, back in 1956 by Dr. Hammond, was proposed the aging theory. He linked everything to ROS. ROS was responsible for all of aging. Now, I don't think it's as simple as that, but ROS definitely changes with aging. This person is 25 years old. I'm just kidding. It's just to give you more blood flow to your head as you just ate. So, as we senesce or get older, our cells actually start to show overproduction of ROS. So if I take a biopsy of people who are older versus those who are younger, we'll see more ROS in older animals and in older people than people who are younger. And that's because some of the systems we have endogenously in our body to protect us against ROS, they don't work as well. So this is a pathway for ROS, and you can see it's very complicated. Some of these pathways, for example, the MAP kinase is beneficial to us, while others are not. For example, you see one there going to the myofilament here. Oxidation of the myofilament is actually very bad for us. It causes us to produce less force. And no one wants to run slower or not be able to lift as much weight as they used to when they were younger. But it happens with ROS. So, to simplify stuff, in our cell, most of the ROS comes from these pathways: NADPH oxidase, xanthine oxidase, nitric oxide synthase, and mitochondria. And when we overproduce ROS in a test tube, the cells all age. They all look like they're aging. So, what is this ROS we're really talking about? This ROS is actually pretty complicated, and I would just like to show you two aspects. On the right-hand side, you will see things like catalase and superoxide dismutase. Those are naturally occurring in our body, and they're naturally occurring because they are there to prevent excess ROS. They break down either hydrogen peroxide or the free radicals themselves. These are what are changing over time. On the left-hand side, these are the ROS we're talking about, like oxygen radicals. So when the amount of ROS increases significantly, we have cell death or apoptosis. When the amount is low, we have a lot of proliferation in healthy cells. So, how many of you all have taken one of these drugs? Aleve, Advil, these are non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. Anyone has ever taken any one of these? Wow, we have a lot of drug addicts in this hall. So, back in 2011, I read an article and I started doing research on NSAIDs because my mother was taking a lot of them and having heart problems. And I wanted to do something about it. So how do medications actually affect cellular health? Ibuprofen is classified by WHO as one of the most essential medicines in your cabinet right now. Basically, everyone should have this according to WHO. It is the wonder drug. It's good for arthritis, it's good for pain, and yes, it works very well for pain. How does it work? NSAIDs work by acting on these cyclooxygenases. In this diagram, they're called COX-1 and COX-2. These are what produces pain and fever, and by inhibiting them, we reduce something called prostaglandins, which is what produces those pain and fever. And by reducing this, we have this release of fever, and we have this relief of pain. However, this paper I saw in 2011 really shook my world. These NSAIDs all cause higher stroke and higher cardiovascular death. The one that caught my eye was ibuprofen. It increases your chance of stroke by 3.36-fold. And this is a metadata analysis study. And a lot of people take these, especially athletes, take them to reduce soreness after they run or before they start running. So this is being used very heavily. Now, this is quite a high figure. If you look below, you'll see ibuprofen also increases your chance of cardiovascular death by 2.4-fold. This is directly linked now to the heart. So what's causing this? We started a 2-year journey, and we were able to publish, and we link it to reactive oxygen species. When we put any NSAID we took, whether it's naproxen, ibuprofen, meclofenate sodium, diclofenac, they all increase reactive oxygen species. This is actual data from a publication of ours, and you can see it's a dose-dependent, and at physiological concentrations that's in our body, we produce ROS by these NSAIDs. So it has a side effect. It works really good for reducing pain and fever, but it has side effects. And one of these side effects is producing reactive oxygen species, which is something we really don't want in this amount. This is showing it another way. So in the left, that's what a normal cells would look like. On the right, that's what cells with diclofenac at physiological concentrations would look like. The color that's green is reactive oxygen species. And if we take something that kills cells like hydrogen peroxide, that's what it looks like below at a very high concentration. So it doesn't just produce ROS, it affects our mitochondria. Remember I told you a little while ago, mitochondria is very important. That's where we produce our ATP. That is the currency of our body. That's what gives me the energy to talk to you right now, for my muscles to contract. That is compromised. Complex 1 is inhibited by both meclofenamide sodium, ibuprofen, and naproxen. So complex 1 and complex 3 are known to be the major producers of ROS in the mitochondria. And this inhibition is causing ROS. So most of the ROS that comes from these NSAIDs are coming from the mitochondria. If we give animals, if we give mice diclofenac, we see the same thing. We see ROS being produced, but I'm switching now to proteostasis, or the proteasome. So the proteasome here, you can see that in every tissue we looked at, so even though cardiovascular death was one of the major causes of the NSAID side effects, was one of the major side effects of NSAIDs, if we look at liver or kidney, we also see proteasome dysfunction. Why is this important to us? The proteasome is critical for removing proteins that are unwanted or oxidized in our body. This is the proteasome pathway. This is called the UPS, not the delivery system, but the ubiquitin proteasome system. And we are only concerned here with the polyubiquitin substrate. When a protein is tagged, it is sent to the proteasome for degradation, and it's degraded, and our body can reuse the amino acids to make new proteins. However, when the proteasome is compromised, as in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, the proteasome is not functioning properly. We have aggregates of these proteins, which causes aggregates which goes into pores and cause clumps in the brain. So the proteasome is really something unique because it's not a garbage can. It's highly regulated. And there are 3 different enzymes in the proteasome, and they're all proteolytic. There's a caspase-like activity, a chymotrypsin-like activity, and trypsin-like activity. And they all function to cleave proteins and break them down into something very small. All right, so why we think this is important? Because it has been shown to be linked to longevity. The mice at the bottom, which is called TG, that's a transgenic mice. And that mice has 50% of the activity of just one of the activities. The other 2, there are 3 activities in the proteasome. 2 of them are normal here, and just 1 is 50% less. So the total amount of activity is probably like 80%. These mice have arthritis very young and die by 1 year, just because of that change. So the proteasome is still there, it's just not as functional. This here is a beautiful creature. This is the naked mole rat, right? Everyone loves the naked mole rat, right? And this has the longest lifespan of any rodent. It lives to 32 years. Does anyone know the average lifespan of a normal rat? 3 years. So this is 10 times more. So would you like to live to 1,000 years? Not if you look like that, right? But many people have done research on this. We have been trying to get our hands on samples. We can't. We have samples from something called Ames mice, which lives 50% longer. And we see the same thing that is seen in this mice. And that is the proteasome is much more active in these mice than in other mice. So you saw before, if you lower the proteasome, it affected longevity. Increasing the proteasome may be linked to longevity. So we studied this in our lab. So, and the good news is, remember I showed you that the NSAIDs are causing so much drastic effects on the cells and the animal. If we look at cell viability, the meclofenamide sodium is going to kill your cells slowly. However, if we add back proteasome, So if you look at the top panel that's red, called A, that is normal proteasome amount in red. The second one is where we add back artificially proteasome. And we were the first lab to add back proteasome into any cell. We're using something called SAIN PhD, and it's from Israel. It's the largest transfection that we know about. So we put back intact purified proteasome, and we see that it protects or brings back some of the cell viability. So proteasome is part of the key here for part of that damage. So we can also prevent the cell death with vitamin C. If we add vitamin C, it prevented cell death. And this helped us suggest that ROS, or reactive oxygen species, was very important, because when we reduce ROS, the cell is not dying. So what's the mechanism? First of all, I spoke to you about oxidative stress. We see it in these tissues. As you take NSAIDs for a long period of time, you have oxidative stress. And we know that because if you look there for the heart in D, you can see that the amount of oxidized proteins increases. So there's clearly oxidative stress. So the mechanism, we believe, is that ROS is affecting the proteasome, causing cell death. It's also causing oxidative stress independently, and that is what is causing the cardiovascular diseases. Further on, the actual mechanism of how that ROS is affecting the proteasome, we were able to find out. The ROS is actually affecting part of the proteasome called the 19S, and it's oxidizing it. It's causing that 19S, which unfolds proteins, not to work properly. So the proteasome is not as effective. The amount of proteasome don't change, but the activity of the proteasome does. So in effect, it's like an aged proteasome, which we see similar things in aged proteasomes. So the idea we have is to try and put some kind of time-release antioxidant layer on these NSAIDs, that you have this at the same time. All right, so let's switch gear. So what do we know? So I showed you a little bit of biology. So what do we know? Of all the literature and using metadata analysis, how can we live longer? Well, the key is veggies and fruits. Studies have shown that only 12% of adults in America actually take the amount of veggies. Why is this important? This diagram, if anything, especially students here, show your parents this diagram. This is the biggest study. This is 833,000 people studied in this metadata analysis. And what they show is that taking 4 or more servings of vegetables and fruits a day decreased your mortality from any cause. That is quite striking. Many of your students are way on this curve. Right? To the left, right? Look how you can improve your life just by this simple thing. Taking more than 5 servings don't help you. So you don't have to carry around a fridge with you. Right? So cherries. In this study of cherries, you see that they took 29 different studies that were published and combined, and most of these studies were cherries just for 2 weeks duration. And this is what they found. Just cherries taking it for 2 weeks. This is quite amazing to me. Reduced inflammation in 11 out of 16 studies. It reduced exercise-induced muscle soreness in 8 out of 9. It reduced blood pressure in 5 out of 7 studies. It reduced arthritis in all the studies it was done in. It improved sleep in 4 out of 4. And we know students don't get proper sleep, right? This is just cherries for 2 weeks. Quite amazing. And one of my favorite is tart cherries. I have my mother on tart cherries for her arthritis, and it works great. Why? Look on the right panel. Look at tart cherries there, and look at ibuprofen and naproxen. Tart cherries inhibits COX-2 with a similar efficacy as naproxen and ibuprofen. So we get the added benefit from something that's natural, that's helping you with the same cherries, but also inhibiting pain. Now, if you have a severe migraine, tart cherry is not going to help. But for minor arthritis to moderate, tart cherry helps a lot. And this is the data to show that there's actually a mechanism behind it. It's inhibiting COX, just like ibuprofen. What about berries? Well, all the metadata analysis shows that berries are fantastic for us too. They reduce systolic blood pressure, fasting glucose, body mass index, and they lower it lowered the low-density lipoprotein, all great stuff. Why? because they all have great antioxidant capacities. This is antioxidants in berries from 12 different varieties and in 2 different methods. So they use 2 independent methods to measure. And no matter how they measured, these have great antioxidant capacities. But they have something even very important besides antioxidant. They have flavonoid, anthocyanins, and polyphenols, which all help us in many other ways that I don't have time to discuss. There are other things that I just want to briefly mention that people don't realize, but garlic and onions, studies have consistently shown that this is great to decrease serum cholesterol, just taken over an 8-week period. It also improves fasting, blood glucose, and other things. Great stuff. Ginger, fantastic for you. Studies have shown that taking ginger, and these are 14 studies combined, reduces body weight and waist to hip ratio. Who doesn't want to have a better waist to hip ratio, huh? Right? Now, not everything is great. Nutritive sweeteners, non-nutritive sweeteners were invented to help us lose weight. However, all studies now point that the regular intake of these sweeteners are associated with a higher BMI or body mass index and cardiometabolic risk. These people are having cardiac problems. Our body doesn't do well with things that are synthesized or non-natural. Put natural stuff in your body, and it will give you the results you want. Nuts is my second take-home message. So fruits and vegetables, 1. Nuts is number 2. Studies have shown that just 3 servings of nuts, it's going to help you. It lowers mortality. Pretty cool, right? And this is only 3 servings. Why? Because nuts actually directly lowers stuff that helps you with cholesterol. There's actually data showing that it affects HMG coenzyme A. And it also has oleic acid as the major fatty acid source. And you'll see at the end why that is so good for us. So get nuts about nuts, guys. Nuts is good for you, all right? I don't have time, but eat less meat and eat more of a Mediterranean diet. That's the gold standard. That's well established. And one of the things why it's so good is because the type of fats there. One thing, unsaturated fats, better. It's not that trans fats and saturated fats are so bad for us. We just have to limit their intake. Why Mediterranean diet seems to be so good? Olive oil by itself seems to be the leader of what the beneficial effects are. This olive oil by itself has been shown to reduce cardiovascular diseases, breast cancer, type 2 diabetes. But more important is that it affects pretty much the things that we're concerned about. We're all concerned about cancer. It reduces cancer risk as you increase olive oil intake. This is not cooked olive oil. This is pure olive oil. It also reduces cardiovascular risk and diabetes. Why? It has lots of vitamins. It has antioxidants. It has phenolic compounds. We don't understand how all these things work. But one thing that is very interesting to me is that it has these other compounds, and one is called oluperin. Oluperin decreases intracellular levels of ROS. Oluperin also increases the lifespan of fibroblasts and other cells by 10 to 15%. But what I am most interested in is that oluperin actually activates the proteasome. It's the only known activator of the proteasome. I showed you before, when proteasome is healthy, we have longevity. So here now, let's, at the end, we want to summarize and go to supplements, because a lot of people take supplements to help them to get that vitamin C or vitamin E. And you can see a multivitamin is taken by about 58% of Americans. And some of you all here take multivitamins, correct? So, do vitamins and minerals actually work? No, says most recent studies. So let's take a closer look. This was in 2013. Enough is enough. Stop wasting money on vitamins and mineral supplements. Based on many studies, they found that beta-carotene, vitamin E, and high doses of vitamin A supplements were actually harmful. They also found that other antioxidants were ineffective in preventing mortality or morbidity due to any major disease. This was a study just on vitamin D. This is 107, what the literature has to offer right now, 107 articles. And they found no support that vitamin D supplementation increased bone mineral density or reduced the risk of fractures and falls in older people. So looking at the data objectively, there's no evidence that vitamin D helped these people. So, yet we use a lot of it. So is it really bad for you? This one actually is the best study I've found, and this uses 1,496 papers and combined that data. And what they found was that it's not as simple as was being taught to you. There are cases whereby multivitamins, you can see there, have no effect. So they found again, multivitamins did not help a healthy person. It had no effect on healthy people. They found vitamin D, calcium, and vitamin C, again, no effect. But what was interesting here is the take home. They found that actually folic acid had some beneficial effect against stroke. They found that B complex also had a small beneficial effect for stroke. But what they found also was that mixtures of antioxidants were actually increasing your mortality. In other words, it was harmful to us. And niacin, when taken with certain other compounds, was actually also causing some harm. So we have to be careful because there can be an increased risk of taking certain things when our body don't need them. This is a study of vitamin C, and again, they concluded that vitamin C in this form does not work like vitamin C in this form. It doesn't give us a benefit, and it actually doesn't prevent us from getting the cold. A lot of people in China right now are taking vitamin C supplements to prevent them from getting the coronavirus. It's not going to help. So, this, I think, sums it up. The American Cancer Society suggests that current evidence does not support the use of dietary supplements for any type of cancer. The American Heart Association recommends nutrients that can be consumed through food rather than supplementation to prevent heart disease. And the Academy of Nutrition and Diabetics states that there is no evidence to support that multivitamin supplements are effective in preventing chronic disease. So future trends that I don't have time to talk about is intermittent fasting seems to be promising, and males and females respond differently, and we have to do more differences between males and females with respect to nutrition. So, confused about what to eat? Research shows that we have to eat more fresh food. Stop taking things in pill form and take it in real food form. Eat more organic food for stuff that have pesticides. Someone's going to speak about pesticides after. So there's something called the dirty dozen. Things like strawberries retain a lot of pesticides, tomatoes, and celery. Reduce artificial and refined sugar and animal fats, and eat a balanced diet. So in summary, the evidence suggests no pill can actually substitute for a good diet unless you are tested and have a deficiency in some vitamin or mineral and you're treated for that, that will be beneficial. But if you're healthy, you don't need a pill. You need real food. Veggies and fruits are critical. Nuts are good. Mediterranean diets are fantastic. And what we know is a lot less than what we don't know. So things will keep evolving, and keep reading the latest news about health and that and make up your own mind. Don't trust what other people say. I left a lot of articles in here because I want you to actually read those articles and read for yourself the data. So this is my lab. We believe in enjoy life, eat well, and exercise. Thank you.